Well, good morning again, everybody. So glad you're with us today. My name is Joel Adorman. I have the honor of being the lead pastor, and I am standing next to a balloon because that means last week somebody made a commitment to follow Jesus, and we are celebrating that today. I never get tired of starting off a sermon right here. And I never get tired of watching our crew adjust to me starting here and not there. It's just fun. It's always fun days. So we do this because Scripture tells us that there is rejoicing and a celebration in heaven when one lost person comes to faith. And so we're excited to be a part of that every week we get to. And that's also something we get from our connection cards. We mention that a lot, and that's why. The connection card is how we know that stuff, unless you just come up and tell us, which is great too, but we just want to know about it so we can celebrate with you. If you're a guest here today, thanks for being here. We hope you'll take us up on the offer to meet us at the guest center for a gift. Just a way of saying thanks for joining us. Not a big deal. We're not going to high-pressure sales pitch. You don't have to. We just want to spend a few minutes with you and get to know you a little bit. If you're joining us online, welcome to you as well. We know there's a certain percentage of you checking us out there, and you're doing your homework, and that's fantastic. But I want to tell you this, as glad as we are that you're there, you will love it when you are here, and so we can't wait to meet you. I want to start the message today talking about money. Now, the second I say that word, I see your response. Everybody starts wiggling. They get uncomfortable, cold sweat. You start wiping your palms. You're like, oh, man, how long till he's done? You start running the timer on me just like I have in front of me. You know what I mean? You're running a timer to make sure I get done. Yeah, I get it. And yet, at the same time, bring that anxiety down a notch. Because we talk about money all the time. We have news networks where advertisers pay good money just to talk to us about money. I mean, we watch these networks. We live and die on this. I remember growing up, we would watch this guy's briefcase. He was the chairman of the Fed at the time. And we would see, is his briefcase fat or skinny? If it was fat, interest rates were going up. Some of you smiling. I remember that. That was the early 2000s. Yeah, that's right. And if it was skinny, interest rates would stay the same. We talk about it all the time. We got the Charles Paynes and the Dave Ramseys telling us how to deal with our money. We all the time. And forget the business networks, mainstream news networks talk about the economy. We're talking about your economy, my economy, the government's economy, the GDP, all this stuff. We talk about money constantly. And politicians know it. Now, politicians are a fun lot. A sick hobby of mine is I love presidential politics. I do. I tell you what, I don't care what you think. Not a dumb person has ever been elected to be president. Because these people, they know how to reel us in. Presidential politics are very unique. Because generally speaking, in modern American life, the presidency is won on one thing, and that's the economy. Doesn't matter how popular you are, it's won on the economy, or lost on the economy. One particular story that involves these two gentlemen back in 1992. Some of you don't remember 92. I remember it well. Some of you are like, well, I remember 82. That's fine. I'm just talking about 92. But in 1992, this man, President George H.W. Bush, not his son, George W., that some of you might remember from the 2000s. That's his dad. He was president back then. George H.W. Bush, he was very popular at the time, running for his second term in office, but the economy was in recession. If you go back, Desert Storm, Desert Shield, that's that era, okay? So we're in that era. We're in the first Gulf War. I lose track of how many wars we've had over there, y'all. Sorry. We're in the first Gulf War over there. He's president, very popular. Wartime presidents, always popular. But then Governor Bill Clinton of Arkansas decides to run for president. But he's facing an incumbent president that is very popular, but who has a bad economy. So then Governor Clinton got in his campaign office, and he established a 4-word campaign slogan for internal to his campaign. He rarely said it out on the campaign trail. This was something he said to his campaign leaders, and something he said even on the local level to the people out there in the grassroots. Do y'all remember what he would say? It's the economy, stupid. Yep, that's what he said. He said they plastered it all over his campaign. They plastered it on inside of his bus. Every conversation he had, he was coached, make it about the economy. Foreign policy, make it about the economy. Work everything back to the economy. Work everything back to the economy because presidential elections in the modern era are won and lost on the economy. And if you know history, you know he went on to win that election to become the 42nd President of the United States and eventually served 2 terms. And he even ran the second time on the economy. And that's what everybody talks about him for, the economy. We talk about money all the time. My generation even had a bumper sticker back in the day that said, "He who dies with the most toys wins." Boy, if that's not Americana, I don't know what is, right? Apple pie, God, family, guns, and he who dies with the most toys wins. But then someone more like me, a little sarcastic, came up with this little ditty. He who dies with the most toys still dies. Right? You're not going to take it with you. Every penny you've got, everything you own, eventually is going to go to somebody else, and maybe even somebody you don't like. Because it came to you from somebody else. You might have gotten it from somebody you didn't like. It all came in one direction. It's all going out in the other. That's just the way it is. That's money. That's how it works. That's life. So that means we have to come up with some way to live for more, because the issue with money is that you're never going to have enough to make you satisfied. And as disciples of Jesus, we acknowledge that the Lord has given us what He's given us, and He has supplied what He has supplied to us so that we can live lives of service and generosity. That's why He's given it to us. And He's honored, and we acknowledge that. Now, the kicker is, we sometimes want more money before we want more godly wisdom, because we're actually a little bit greedier than we care to admit. That as Americans, we are swimming in the same waters everybody else is. We're voting like everybody else is. We're in the same situation. We too are worried about the economy. I get it. I mean, this message was planned out and was established on our calendar when the economy was not teetering on the edge of another recession. This was like in June when we're doing this. Last June, we had a little more rosy perspective on this. And so now we understand why it's coming where it is. But this is what we've got to deal with. And the Bible is not silent on any of this. So as we continue this message series, The Ways of the Wise, it's looking at themes from the book of Proverbs and trying to learn God's wisdom for these situations in life that we're going to find ourselves in. Because like it or not, we're going to find ourselves in all kinds of situations. And we're going to go, okay, what does God say about this? And then what am I supposed to do with that? That's what this series is about. And today is part number 2. We started last Sunday on Resurrection Day. What a great day that was. But today is part 2, Wisdom for Greed. We're going to talk about, what does the Bible say about greed? What does it say about the acquisition of stuff? Is it bad to be rich? Is it bad to be poor? We're going to hit all that. And we're going to use Proverbs 16:16 as kind of a foundation, as a launching pad, to really help us see where's the foundational level in Scripture when it comes to greed and coming to wisdom. If that happens to be page 443 in the Pew Bible there in front of you, that blue Bible there in front of you, and if you don't own a print Bible of your own, then please receive this and keep this as a gift from us to you, and we'll be so grateful to know that we can be a part of your lives with that. The words, in theory, should end up back on those screens. If not, just do your best to ignore that, and we're going to get through this together. Proverbs 16:16 says this, "How much better to get wisdom than gold, to get insight rather than silver." You see, wisdom leads to effective stewardship. That's where wisdom is going to take us. Now, when you talk about wisdom, we have to go back to last week's definition. Biblical wisdom is applying intelligence both morally and ethically. So you have to have both those parts in there. It's not just about having the intelligence and now doing something with it. It is having the intelligence and doing something with it, but doing that in an ethical and a moral way. Because the Lord is concerned with how we behave. Motive matters. Why we do something matters. And it matters with our money as well. And a lot of verses in the Proverbs deal with money. A lot of the Proverbs deals with money. And Proverbs 6:6-8, which if you've been keeping up with reading a chapter of Proverbs a day, you did not read this one last week. But if you've been doing it before that, you did the week before that. But Proverbs 6:6-8 says this, "Go to the ant, you sluggard, consider its ways and be wise. It has no commander, no overseer or ruler, yet it stores its provisions in summer and gathers its food at harvest." See, part of biblical stewardship is understanding that hard work is a good thing. It's a good thing to work hard. If you get to the end of your workday and you're tired, good. You're supposed to be. It's called work. Okay? And that's part of biblical stewardship, that we understand that there's no such thing as a free lunch. That there's really not something free. If I get something free, it means somebody else worked for it and gave it to me. But somebody still had to do the work for that. Biblical stewardship teaches me that it's okay to work hard. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with working hard with your mind, and there's nothing wrong with working hard with your hands. There's nothing wrong with hard work. That's part of biblical stewardship. And wisdom leads to effective stewardship. Biblical wisdom leads to effective stewardship. But you got to know this too. Effective stewardship won't necessarily make us rich, but it will make us content. And I'm here to argue that's more important. See, sometimes we want to take this idea that if you just follow the biblical principles, you're going to be wealthy. And to a degree, that is true. There is a certain level of wisdom there that could make you quite wealthy. Things about, don't take a risky investment. That's in there too. That's good wisdom. That works. But it's not necessarily there to make us rich. It's there to try to make us content. It's there to make us satisfied, to get our eyes off of the accumulation of stuff and get our eyes on the Lord so He reorients all of that, no matter how much or how little we have. Now, if you've been doing a chapter of Proverbs a day, you did read this one this last week. Proverbs 11, 24 and 25 says, one person gives freely, yet gains even more. Another withholds unduly. The key word there is unduly. In other words, they could give, but they don't. But they come to poverty. A generous person will prosper. Whoever refreshes others will be refreshed. See, that's not about richness or wealth or having a bunch of money and a bunch of stuff. That's about contentment. Generous people are content people. They're content. They're not necessarily wealthy. They're just satisfied. And so they realize, I don't need this, but you do. Here you go. And they're generous and they refresh others, as the Proverbs puts it. Because remember Proverbs 16:16, where we started, that it's better to get wisdom than gold and that insight's better than silver. Now I understand that for most of us, we're going to nod at that and go, yeah, that's true. But our behavior is not going to match that. We're trying to match those today, okay? We're trying to get the behavior and the nodding in the same place, okay? Because the Lord's trying to make us content with what we have. I know some phenomenally generous people who are quite poor. And I know some phenomenally generous people who are quite wealthy. Now, what's the difference? Now, the size of the donation's different, sure. The size of their generosity might be different, sure, but in the eyes of heaven, it's the same. Why? Because their sacrifice was the same. Their gift was different, but that's up to the Lord. He determines what's in our accounts. Our attitude towards shoving that out of our accounts, now that's us. That's on us. That's what He's doing in us and our receptiveness to that. It's not about income statements. What's funny is that the Proverbs never says, look, when you hit this threshold of money, you can now finally be a generous and open-handed person. It never says that. It just says be a generous, open-handed person because that's what God has done to you. That's all it says. It just says do that. It doesn't even deal with the fact that God gives us something, and no matter how much or how little, because it's not the point. The purpose of the Proverbs and the purpose of effective stewardship isn't to make us rich. It's not a get-rich-quick scheme. Okay, the Bible is not just your multi-level marketing. It's not that. It's designed for us to put these principles into practice because He's trying to teach us contentment, to be satisfied with what we have. No matter how little, no matter how much, He's trying to teach us to be satisfied, be content, because Jesus-centered contentment honors the Lord and blesses us. You say, blesses us? Now that just sounds bad. I shouldn't be blessed. I should always be miserable. A good Christian's always miserable. You don't know the same Jesus I know. But 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 6 through 10 says this. Check us out. But godliness with contentment is great misery. Oh, wait. It said great gain. Wow. I want great gain. That sounds awesome. But it's not talking about money. It's talking about attitude. He goes on, verse 7. For we brought nothing into the world, and we can take nothing out of it. But if we have food and clothing, we'll be content with that. Those who want to get rich, I wish I could underline that on the screen. Those who want to get rich, that's not saying those who are rich. It's not saying if you have a lot of money, you're a sinner. Those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. And now the most misquoted verse in the whole Bible. We did a message series called Misquoted a few years ago. This was by far the most misquoted verse in the entire Bible. And it drives me crazy because then it gets misquoted in a way that makes it say the exact opposite of what Paul is trying to say. He writes this, for the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil. The misquote is, money's the root of all evil. That is not what he said. He says the love. It's the same thing he said in the verse previous. Same thing he said in verse 9. Those who want to get rich, that get rich quick idea, that whole always got a scheme going on, always got a plan, always after the bigger, better deal. That's what he's talking about. That love of money, root of all kinds of evil. And here's why. Some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. Why? Because they'll sell their soul to the devil for $1. That has nothing to do with how many dollars they have. Actually, the people, again, I know a lot of people. I'm sure you do too. But I've known people who are just always chasing after $1. Not only are they miserable, they're miserable to be around because they're always selling you something. They're always selling you on the next idea. And it's just never quite, oh, I got this great idea for this thing. Enough, bro, enough. And after a while, you just stop answering the phone because you know they're just selling you something. Now, I used to work in auto sales. Now, when you work in new car sales is different from used car sales. Those of you who've done that, I highly recommend everybody needs to take a turn working retail. Oh, my word. Work retail and you will see how the American public really thinks. Yeah, for those of you who work in retail, God bless you. I know people are so mean to you. I know. Oh, my goodness. I work in new car sales. That's different than used cars. Used car sales, you're selling value. New car sales, you're not selling bacon. You're selling sizzle. It's different. Why? Because I figured out that if I really wanted to sell a car, I had two options. I could play up what I know your desire is, because your desire is to look better than the person next to you. Do you really need that Tahoe with the leather seats when you only pull in $30,000 a year? That vehicle is $70,000. You really need that car? Maybe you do. Do you really? So I'd have those people who rolled into the lots what they wanted. Why? Because their neighbor had one. They wanted one a little better. Now I had two choices. I could go that route, or I could go the route to say, hey, what are you really trying to do? Oh, you got a family of 10 kids? Okay. A Tahoe might be a little small for you. Let's go look at the vans, okay? Let's go look at the large family express over here. And now you're just trying to meet their needs, but the reality is, auto sales, I can't confess to every sales, I don't know, but auto sales deals with a lack of contentment. That's the whole reason you go buy it. Every now and again, you got somebody who was really wise and careful, and they came in with all their I's dotted, T's crossed, and they're like, hey, I want to see that car. I got this reason for it, and you're like, yes, ma'am, let's do it. Let's rock and roll. That was rare. Most of the time, the guy comes along and saying, man, I want a Corvette. Bro, me too. There was a Corvette on the lot. I remember it was sat in the showroom. Prettiest car. I'm a Corvette fan. I love anybody who's talking about cars. You know, I get stars in my eyes on Corvettes. I just think that's such a beautiful, it's an American sports car. Well, there was this Stingray sitting in the showroom, 120-something thousand. And I swear, every guy under 30 walked in and said, man, can I take it for a test drive? When I see your insurance, yeah. You wrecked that bad boy. It's my soul on the line. Because the whole thing was about a lack of contentment. But Jesus-centered contentment honors the Lord and blesses us, but it might not and probably won't be financial. And that's my whole point. My whole point is we want to get a blessing out of it where God makes us wealthy, where God gives us more, where His kids are living it up. And Jesus is saying, I'm trying to show you faith. I'm trying to teach you to rest and let me do it. And then I'll take care of that stuff down the road. So I think the Lord hasn't given me a Corvette for a lot of reasons. One, I think He knows I would probably appear before a judge all the time for speeding tickets, because those things are meant to run. And so the Lord had to teach me to be content with driving my Nissan Altima. My wife knows me so well. But it's true. And look, my little Nissan Altima, she doesn't have a big V8. She doesn't go, no, she's got a 4-cylinder. I press that button and start it up, and it goes, Stomp the gas, and it goes, what you doing? But I get over 30-something miles a gallon in the city, so I know that's, look, I'm a celebrity now. 2 years ago, we all been going, that's pretty good. Who cares? See, time's changing. But the Lord had to teach me contentment. I still want a sports car, but the Lord is trying to say, son, relax. you've got what you need. You've got reliable transportation, goes from point A to point B in relative comfort. What more do you need? And it's like, okay, Lord, I don't really need anything else. See, that honors the Lord, and it blesses us because it gets us out of this race of trying to have more and more and more. And like the song from The Greatest Showman, never enough. No, it really is enough. But our culture works against us and teaches us something else. And so this monster, this dragon of greed is just constantly gnawing at us and attacking us. And Jesus has a solution for that. And it's biblical stewardship. Because biblical stewardship tames greed. I think ultimately it could defeat greed, but I'm a one step at a time kind of guy. Take one step. Biblical stewardship tames greed. It starts pushing us away from, I just need more. Now, notice we haven't talked one shred about rich versus poor. Because, by the way, that's presidential politics. You think there's any reason we start talking about how the rich are bad and how the poor need all the help in the world? You think that's an accident we talk about that every presidential election cycle? No, it's not an accident. That's the way politics works. But the Bible doesn't talk about that part. Because it's not about the warfare between rich or poor. It's about what are you doing with what God has given you. What He's given you, that's between the Lord and you. And what He's given you, He's calling you to tame that beast of greed in your life and practice biblical stewardship, which is about that difference between income and expense. And yes, it's about generosity. And yes, it's about service. It's about all that stuff. But what He puts in your account, that's His business. That's not up to me to criticize you. Your job is to tame that beast and move forward. But there's a reason Proverbs 3:9 says, honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Because the Bible, of course, has said it, that biblical stewardship tames greed. That as we honor Him by putting Him on the top of that list. By making sure we understand that our very act of giving, our very act of generosity shows the Lord, I recognize, I acknowledge you are the one that gave me everything. If you think about it like a pie, okay? You divvy that pie up to your bills. You keep giving it away for your bills, okay? And then you give some over here, you give some over there. But see, what giving does, what generosity does, it reminds us that the whole pie belongs to Jesus. He gave us the pie. It's His pie. And so what Scripture is teaching us is as you cut that part out, make sure that generosity is in there. Because it's His pie. And He says, this is what I want you to do. I want you to be a good steward, but I want you to be generous. And then I'll refresh you. See, He's teaching us faith. He's teaching us to take the step. Then He takes care of it. Let's be honest, we want it the other way. We want God to go, poof, here's all the money you're ever going to need. Infinite money. And then we go, I'll be generous then. No, you won't. No, you won't. You won't. Let's see if this one resonates with you. Author Randy Alcorn wrote this in his incredible book, Money, Possessions, and Eternity. Highly recommend it. He wrote this, too often we assume that God has increased our income to increase our standard of living, when His stated purpose is to increase our standard of giving. Biblical stewardship tames greed. That's why I say I've seen wealthy people and I've seen poor people who have been very, very generous, more generous than I ever thought of being, who have been models of generosity, and yet their incomes are vastly different because it's not about income. It's about what you're doing with what God gave you. It's biblical stewardship. It's taming greed, that desire to always have more, that desire to always just get a little bit more. What if that little bit more He's just giving you so He's trying to teach you generosity? So what we have to do is we can't be afraid of the talk about money. We have to rethink money. Money is a great tool, but a terrible taskmaster. Terrible, terrible taskmaster. Years ago, I guess now I was trying to figure it up earlier this week. I think it's been about maybe 20 years. Maybe not quite that long, maybe more like 16, 17. But he was an old rancher. And you can learn a lot from ranchers and farmers. Just listen to them. A lot of wisdom in that. But this old rancher, he told me, he leaned back one day and he said, Pastor, I was sitting out at his place and looking at all these cows. He leans back, he goes, Pastor, I've noticed a funny thing. What's that? He said, man, a guy can make $30,000 a year and spend every penny of it and not have anything to show for it. Then he bit down his toothpick and he said, or a guy can make $750,000 and have nothing to show for it. He said, it makes you wonder, it's not about the money, is it? Wow. It's not about the money, is it? Because whether you have a lot or a little, you may still have nothing to show for it. That's why we have to rethink it. It's a tool. It's a resource God has given us. So I want to encourage you to do something that's very painful right now in these times, and that is look at your budget. Dave Ramsey, who I listen to on a regular basis, he said this at the pastor's conference not long ago. He said it for years, but I heard it in my ears a few years ago. He said, pastors, don't tell your people to give until you tell them to make a budget. I agree. Look at your budget. Look at where your income is. Look at where your expenses are. I know that's painful right now. I know. I live in the same world you do. Okay, I got my PG&E bill just like you did. Last year at this time, if I had a $50, $60 month, that was a big month. Boy, I'd like to have that back. But you got to look at it. You got to see the numbers. See what they are. Look at where you're at. Joel, it hurts. I know. But good biblical stewardship means I'm not afraid of the facts. I embrace the facts. I can't tackle what I don't see. I got to look at it. You got to see what I have coming in. Maybe your income has not gone up the needed 8 to 12% that you need to combat the inflation we've been dealing with for a few years. Maybe not. Maybe it has. Maybe not. Fine. You still got to look at that. It means you may need to get someone else to help you. Okay. If you're married, of course, I'm talking about you and your spouse are doing this together. But even if you're married or single, maybe you need someone else to help look at it. You'd be shocked at what some outside person can find and go, you don't need that. You can cut that. Oh, but I have to have that. Really? Do you? Do you really have to have that? An outside source can sometimes help you with that. You can get that in your small groups. If you don't know anybody in your group that's a good financial person, we have people that have volunteered themselves to the church that we can put you in contact with, and they can help you. And they have offered to do that. And by the way, they're very good with money. And they can help, and they're kind, but they're straight. They're going to shoot straight with you. They're not going to mess around. But I mean, they're going to help. Okay, but you got to look at that budget. But while you're looking at your budget, also look out for greed. Look out for those spots that you're just saying, hey, I got to have this just because I want this. Sometimes when we say, I really want this, sometimes that's a code word for I deserve this. You don't deserve anything, neither do I. I don't deserve anything. What I deserve is hell. Jesus has given me heaven. I don't want what I deserve. I want what the Lord's given me. See, that's an attitude. That has nothing to do with income. That is attitude. But look out for greed. Look at, are you generous? You want to see what you value? Look at your accounts. Look at your spending. You'll see what you value. You say, Joel, what I value is trying to live, and there's nothing wrong with that. Part of biblical stewardship is paying your bills. You've got to pay MID or whoever your power service is. You've got to pay PG&E or whoever your gas service is. You've got to fill up the car if you've got a car. You've got to put air in the tires. You've got to go get the tires rotated. You've got to take care of your stuff. That's all good. That is part of biblical stewardship. But you have to also watch out for greed and look at your generosity. Look at where you're actually helping somebody else. Remember, I've known very poor people who were very generous. But it's not because they had a ton of money. What they had was a ton of heart. And they said, you know what? I've got a little. Here, you need this more than I do. Or they just give to their church because they're like, hey, this is what I do. The Lord's commanded me to do it. I'm just following through on that. Yesterday, you probably got our email about that, our quarterly financial update. If you didn't, it means either got caught in your junk mail or we don't have your email address. We send those out every quarter to tell you where you are as a church. But we talked in there about this baseball diamond of giving. And I love that because I'm kind of a, step-by-step guy. I said that. What I like about that is it just encourages you to take another step. Just get to the next base. Wherever you're at in generosity, just get to the next base. Go back, look at that email. I'm not going to retell you everything you just looked at and saw. But go dig that email up. Maybe you deleted it. Go dig it up. Look at the very bottom. It talks about this baseball diamond. But the whole thing is investing in eternity. Because when you get to the end of your life, all that stuff you stressed out over and got frustrated over and got angry over, none of that's going to matter. And I know that's easy to say. I know it's easy to say, but I'm in the same boat. I'm living there too, okay? I'm swimming in the same ocean you are. We're in the same world. We're in the same economy. And the Lord still tells us, hey, look outward. Remember where everything came from. Because as disciples of Jesus, the Lord is honored when we acknowledge Him as the giver of everything we have. And then we bless Him by blessing others through our open-handed generosity. And that has nothing to do with income. It has nothing to do with expenses either. It's everything about our hearts. It's everything what the Lord has called us to do and called you to do and called me to do. I don't know what that is for you. I know what it is for me. What is it for you? Because biblical stewardship tames greed. It starts pushing that down. And that's the Lord's wisdom for greed.